Well, welcome to another episode of TJM. I have to compete with wind noise and cicada noise, so I hope you can hear me all right. This is my 1989 Jaguar Sovereign V12. I purchased it about 2.5 years ago. I purchased it as a sight unseen, and I only paid $2,000 for it. You're best off to buy a car with a history, which this one didn't have, unfortunately. You're best off to buy one with no rust, which unfortunately this thing had plenty of rust. And you're best off to make sure that it's been well tuned and maintained and looked after over the years. This one I really don't know because I didn't get a service history with it. When I bought this car, it had a lot more rust than it was originally described. Almost too much to think whether it is worth doing or not. But I chose to continue with it because I felt like, in general, the car was still savable and it was a good strong car. It had rust in the front windscreen. It had rust in both guards. It had rust in the driver's door and the driver's mirror. It had rust under the lower front seal, through there, and a few other little bits and pieces around it. But the biggest issue with the rust was the windscreen. The Series 3 was the first of the bonded screens, meaning it was the screen was bonded together with a polyurethane adhesive straight onto the frame of the body. And the reason why they rust around the windscreen is because of this outer seal here. And this is actually not even a seal really, it's just more of for aesthetic reasons to fill around the chrome strip. Water, dirt, ingress under that seal, slowly seeps into where the paint is, and then all of a sudden oxidization and rust starts to build up around windscreens and also the rear. A good way of fixing it is you can see that there, that rubber is still not fastened in because they don't fasten them in when new. So the good way of trying to prevent it, if you don't have any rust in your screen, is to remove this rubber and fill it with a sealant and replace it and clean it up just to make sure that no water gets underneath it. They can rust a lot underneath in the seals, not so much in Australia because we don't have salt on our roads. Meaning that, yeah, they're not going to get too much structural rust in them, which is a good thing. So this example is in satin beige. It's really quite an 80s colour, but she's really pretty. And it's sporting the Pepper Pot 15-inch wheels with the correct 205 by 70 tyres on it. You can change the tyres and put a different profile tyre on it, which costs less than that 205/70. Some people say it changes the total ride of a Series 3. I'm not too sure about that. They put 215/65s, which is pretty much the same profile as a 205/70 anyway, but just gives that little bit of wideness. This thing needs new tyres, so most likely we're going to put new tyres on it. And if the 215/65s are a little bit cheaper than a 205/70, I'm sure they're going to be, it's going to be a better result for me. Being a 89 model, it's unleaded. Now you can always tell an unleaded car by its two fuel caps because they are raised a little bit higher than a leaded motor car, and that's because they have the restriction only to put a unleaded fuel Bowser tap in it. Another thing I've just noticed, and this can cause flat batteries, and this one is no exception. The little reading light loves to just stay on there, so it's just a little poor connection, and if you rattle a little bit it'll stay on, so I might just have to try and find out why that's a little bit loose. But you can go unnoticed and you go back to get the car in a few days time and you've got a flat battery. Another place where they rust is the sunroofs. On the back of the sunroof where you can't see it, where the lip falls up behind here, that's where they'll rust, and then you'll notice that the sunroofs aren't closing properly and you wonder why, and it's because it's building up a lot of rust.
Okay, a little bit of history on the Series 3. It first came out in 1979. It used the long wheelbase version of the XJ6, incorporating a subtle redesign by Pininfarina. Externally, most of the changes over the Series 2 were that it incorporated rubber bumpers with the chrome upper and lower edges on it. It also had the flush door handles for increased safety. It had one-piece door glass without that separate little quarter window that had on the Series 2, and it also had the vertical vanes in the grille. The reverse lights were changed into the tail lights and taken away off the boot plinth. Engine variants, they came out with 3, but Australia really only had the 2. It had the 5.3 litre V12, which my Sovereign has, and it also, the Series 3 obviously had the 4.2 litre XK engine. It also had a 3.4 litre 6-cylinder engine that was available in European markets. I think they did that for tax purposes. Interesting to note that the 3.4 litre still wore SU carburetors, while the 4.2 litre and the V12 had the new fuel injection, Bosch fuel injection, under license from Lucas. In 1981, the 5.3 V12 received the new Michael May design Fireball high compression cylinder heads, and they were badged from 85 as the HE, the high efficiency models, which was a big improvement on the V12 engine. In 1984, there was more revisions to the Jaguar Series 3, where they dropped the base spec XJ12, and the Sovereign was the only model you can get in Jaguar, which was higher spec, and the Daimler, they called it the Daimler 66. So the minor upgrades included, well, a trip computer. It was fitted to all standard on V12s. And also it was given the much sought after wheels, distinctive circular holes that were commonly known as the pepper pot wheels. Don't know if the Melica got the pepper pot wheels, but we sure did. The production of the XJ12 Series 3 went all the way till 1992. The 6-cylinder finished in 1987, and in all, total, there was only 10,500 Series 3 V12s built, as opposed to the roughly 122,000 Series 3 6-cylinder engines. So it makes them a rare car. Let's have a look under the bonnet of this beautiful V12. Woohoo. Yep, they're a bit scary to look at it from the start if you don't really know what you're looking at. At present time, I don't have my cruise control bellow in there. I've yet to replace that and fix that up. I've also removed my old air conditioning condenser because it was leaking, and I've got a new condenser and dryer coming up from Fenair from UK, so that'll be exciting when that arrives. So let's have a look at what we really need to check out if you really want to buy one of these. Just the things that I've had to deal with and things that can go wrong with them. First of all is oil leaks. They can pretty much leak from everywhere. But the two main culprit spots are the oil pressure sender, which is just down there where the valley is, that they have a tendency to leak when they get old. And another major spot is the rear end of the rocker cover gaskets. They will leak at the back there, and that's a bit of a job because you've got to pull the intake manifolds off and all these fuel rails. So they're probably the main two areas where it'll leak oil. It's important to, when you're going to test drive one of these, make sure you take it for a long test drive, because you want to know whether it overheats or not. You might be able to drive it around for about half an hour and it won't heat up. As soon as you start going up a hill, the temperatures just might start creeping up on you. And that could be a number of reasons. Normally it's not getting correct flow through the system. These things have two thermostats, one on each bank. Unfortunately, it only has one temperature sender, and that's on the left bank. So if the right bank's getting hot, you don't know about it. I did have to replace the radiator on this because it wouldn't get hot for ages. You drive it around for about 40-50 minutes, but as soon as you start labouring it up a hill a little bit, the temperatures just would just start getting a little bit hot. But changing the radiator it really sorted that problem out. Mind you, when I bought this aluminium radiator off Easy Bay, and it's a pretty good quality sort of radiator. There's nothing wrong with it, but the millimetre fittings just don't fit correctly in all spots. So It just takes just a little bit of tweaking to actually install it. Also check your viscous coupling fan. Make sure it is not spinning freely and it has some resistance on it, because if it spins freely, the car will certainly overheat in traffic. And it's also so important to ensure that these things are bled correctly in the cooling system. If they're not bled and all the air is taken out of them, you'll also have a tendency to overheat. Check your harnesses, make sure they're not cracked and ugly. Most of them will have some sort of deterioration by now. Looking at that, I have replaced my injector harness, which I bought a new one for. You can actually make them up yourself if you have the time to do it. And I've brought the injector harness above the valley so it doesn't expose to too much heat down there. It probably needs a few cable ties just to put it in place a little bit, but it's not going to get damaged down below there. Another really important thing is to inspect all your injector hoses for cracks and leaks. That's where these things can have engine fires by petrol weeping out of these small little rubber injector hoses onto your distributor, and your distributor could have old leads on it and they could be arcing between the cylinders, and that will certainly ignite the fuel that's leaked. Also a good idea to see if there's been any service history on the distributor, because the advanced mechanisms in a distributor can seize up after a while, and that will affect the performance of the car eventually, and so the distributor needs to be removed, the cap, and make sure that those weights are returned backwards and forwards. You can also see that I've replaced my heater tap. Always check for leaks there, because they do deteriorate, but they're easy to replace and they're reasonably cheap. Also just check all your coolants and your transmission fluids and the colour of the engine oil. It's always important. Oh, another little factor, the throttle body linkages have washers down here, and these washers tend to deteriorate and causes issues with your butterfly valves not opening correctly at the same time. These ones have been replaced. I didn't do them, so it is pretty much working as they should. That's your little ignition amplifier under there. These are your two fuel regulators. This one is your inlet fuel regulator, which is more of just of a pulse regulator. It just reduces any pulse that your fuel pump might be putting through. And this one regulates how much fuel you need to go through there, and that line there goes back to the tank. Down on your left hand manifold below there, just where that pipe hooks up, it's called your auxiliary air valve. That auxiliary air valve is there to allow additional air to enter your intake manifolds on very cold climates. In Australia, auxiliary air valve is not really necessary, as we don't have a cold enough climate for it necessary to open. As I mentioned, I'm not a mechanic. This is purely just to let you guys know what I've experienced owning this beautiful car for the last 3 years. Okay, let's take this thing for a test drive. Because I haven't got my air conditioning going, I've got my windows open, but I've got a little mic here, so hopefully you can hear me okay. We'll take off. Obviously, make sure it's running on all 12 cylinders as soon as you take off. It can be hard to detect because they're so highly engineered, these cars, that if it's only running on 11, you may not necessarily know that straight away. I've actually gone and done some test drives on vehicles that I particularly thought I might want to buy in V12s. And the seller's saying, oh, it runs beautifully, and you get there and it's only running on 11 cylinders, but he had no idea, because they're still pretty powerful engines. Make sure it's got plenty of pull. They're not going to throw your head back in the back of the seat, especially with the GM 3-speed gearbox in it, but you'll find that they're pretty robust. Yeah. Check to make sure that it's not understeering. If you feel like it's steering from the back of the car, it means your trailing arm bushes are worn and it's throwing the back cradle left and right. Check that. Obviously, when you brake, make sure it's not pulling to the left or right anywhere. Take it for a long test run. As I said before, these things can overheat if the cooling system hasn't been maintained. and there's a lot of maintenance in that cooling system. And you won't know it's going to overheat until about half an hour worth of driving, and you start labouring up a few hills and the temperature gauge starts going up. This is what this one did. After I did everything except for the radiator, but I ended up having to change the radiator, and now it's just stays really stable. I'm really happy with it. So what we'll do, we'll get up on this bit of a straight up here and give it a bit of a burn. Yeah, I'm really starting to like this car more and more as I do more work on it. What have I done so far on it? I from the top of my head, I've done a lot. First of all, we had to get it going correctly, and we had a lot of issues there, mainly because it had really poor fuel lines with a lot of rust in them, and the fuel tanks were pretty much shot. So we had to do all that cleaning up that fuel system. So we took the rails off, cleaned up all the injectors. Well, actually, we had them all sonically clean, put new spark plugs in it, cleaned the rails, pulled down the distributor, serviced all the distributor, new plugs, new leads, new distributor cap, new rotor, new fuel pumps. We put the new radiator in it when it had the tendency to overheat a little bit, new thermostats, new hoses, new belts, new viscous coupling for the fan, new harmonic balancer. I haven't had to do, but as the thing, all those things are pretty superficial. I've done no work on the suspension whatsoever, and I probably really need to change the rear shockies. The shocks are okay, but I think the springs are a little bit tight because it's hanging a little bit lower than a Rolly should. But I've got a nice set of King springs, and what other shockies have I got? I've got the KYB shockies to put in. Yeah. Anyway, we're on a bit of a straight here. Let's just slow it down a little bit and see if we can get this thing cruising at a high speed. Here we go. Oh, she's got some pickup. Fuck, she's got some pickup. Holy shit. She's a big car to get around corners, but you know, a bit of sway there, but she's not doing anything wrong. She's going around them pretty quick. Oh, it does put a smile on my face. It is a lovely car. It's so impressive. So impressive. Oh, fuck. We'll turn around up here. Yeah. We'll just chuck a little left righty here and go around this corner. Oh, we don't want to go in that hole. Okay, let's have a look at the interior and the gauges and see what we have to look out for here. If you're thinking about buying one of these things, try and start it cold. This thing's already been for a drive, so it's starting to warm up. Check out all the gauges, see if they're all going. Always be a bit slow creeping up, as you can see. Oil pressure's looking, because the engine's already warm, it's not going to show as high as it is when it's cold. Temperature moves up, make sure both gauges work, make sure both tanks are going. Just press left and right and see if that's happening. Check your lights, make sure they're all good. All obvious stuff, guys. More importantly, the climate control. This is in this 89, it's a Delonair Mark III. The earlier models had Delonair Mark II systems in it. I don't know if there's that much advantage of having a Delonair Mark III, but obviously get the fans running, so you can get cold air through your vents down below. And this, because this is the Mark III, it's got manual auto, manual for out, auto for in, and you can direct your air up and below, your hot air to your cold air from that little vent under there. Check your radio, make sure your speakers aren't blown. 30-year-old speakers, they're just about would be stuffed by now. Well, my dryer and condenser has come from Thin Air in the UK. My Series 3. Looks pretty groovy. There's a dryer in there, I think. Looks pretty groovy too. So, let's get it installed. Okay, new condensers in. So all we've got to do is hook the dryer up now. I know that's squashed down a little bit too. That didn't do that either. The only other issue is that the dryer is a slightly smaller diameter than the older one. So these brackets aren't going to fit properly, so I'll probably just have to get maybe a bit of, I don't know, a bit of rubber around it. I might try and see if I can find an old radiator hose and wrap a bit around it just so we can hold them tight. That'll do. Okay, we're nearly all there. Got the receiver dryer in. That's looking nice and tidy and tight. Got the cover back on the top of the radiator. So, and we've got our condenser in there too, ready to be cleaned up and gassed so we can have some nice air conditioning again. I'm happy when a plan gets together and the job gets done. Well, okay, as I said, it's not meant to be a full review. It's just what I've experienced by owning a V12 Series 3 Jaguar for the last 3 years, and let you know what I have done to it and what a lovely car they are. So if you made it this far on the video, thank you very much. And if you liked the video, you can give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, it's free, you can do that too. If you want to leave a comment or a question down below, I love hearing from you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
The mechanical side of things, and just see what's gone wrong with this one and what to also look out for. And thirdly, we're going to take it for a drive and have a look underneath it and just really see how well it drives and what we've got to do. That doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway. The big differences between a Series 2 and a Series 3, well, there's a lot really. The Series 3 was given to